Hello and welcome, my name is Racho, and today we will be covering Oberon's new rework. Honestly, before his rework, I would have considered Oberon the worst Warframe in the game. While there are probably a few other Warframes that I could consider that may have been the worst more than him, he is the one that I always said was the worst, but there are a few really bad ones. After his rework, well, I'll get to my review after I explain his abilities, so that my review may make a bit more sense with the context of what his abilities actually do now and how nothing's really changed except the fact that his abilities play better than what they did before. But let's get into it. Starting off with his passive. Well, Oberon got an entirely new passive, which honestly I'm a little disappointed by it because I actually liked the idea of Oberon's old passive, but I understand it as Oberon's old passive was not great. But basically, his old passive gave Link Vitality, Link Fiber, and Link Redirect to his companions. I actually think it was all companions in the team, which was a nice little buff for companions. Now, it is completely different, however. Basically, the way it works now is that whenever Oberon picks up a health or a universal orb, he will get one righteous shield for his stack, or whatever it's called, for both himself and also all of his allies. Now, what do these do? They're basically Mesmer Skin. If you don't know what Mesmer Skin works, it's one of Revenant's abilities, and it makes it so that Revenant doesn't take any damage. Right now, you can see I have the 3 shields activated on me that you do just by picking up health orbs. You pick it up, and pretty much the way it works is if I take damage from an enemy, I don't. Instead, one of the shields goes away. I get a period of invincibility. Then before a cooldown, before another shield can be used up, and then once that runs out, the next shield will be used up, and then I won't take damage. So as long as I pick up health orbs, I don't die, pretty much. Like, I don't die. That's the whole thing, right? Now this sounds really good. As long as you pick up health orbs, both you and your whole team basically have infinite infinite invincibility. But like, again, there's a reason why Revenant is considered a boring Warframe, and it's because Mesmer Skin makes you immune to all forms of damage. And people don't really find that enjoying when you click one button and you're now immune to all forms of damage. It's not quite as bad as Mesmer Skin, because Mesmer Skin gives you like 14 stacks, where this only gives you 3, and you need to pick up health orbs to activate it. But it's very easy to get health orbs, and considering his entire kit is based around being a health tank, and his passive makes him immune to damage, it's a little questionable. But hey, whatever. Next up, we have his first ability, Smite, and which in my opinion is probably now Oberon's best ability. Previously, Smite just did like a tiny little bit of radiation damage to enemies, and it did have some interesting interactions with how it worked with things like Zartar's Whisper, but it was finicky to say the least. The way Smite now works is that you target a single enemy, it then deals the damage of that enemy based on a portion of its health, while also armor stripping it and also getting rid of its whole overguard, and then it does a portion of the damage it did to that enemy to enemies around it. The damage it does caps out at 75% of the enemy's health, but that means that this ability will infinitely scale and always do 75% of their enemy's health as damage to them, meaning they will be left with 25% of their health. And that might not sound that crazy, but when you realize that all you need to do is add a little viral priming to the mix, you have an infinitely scaling one-shot. You'll notice that the AoE damage from it is basically nothing, as the AoE damage is only like a very little percent of the actual overall damage it's doing to the enemies. So really the only purpose of this is that it's an infinitely scaling one-shot, which, as long as you viral prime, of course, which for generic content isn't good, but for things like level cap Cascade, where you want to one-shot the Void Thrax, or even Demolish units in Disruption, there's definitely a place for this. The augment for this ability is also pretty good. It gives you a 100% radiation damage buff to both yourself and your allies whenever you hold cast the ability. Now, the sad thing is I would probably consider this his best ability right now, and it's a Helminth ability. Now, I don't know how it's different in the Helminth. I imagine the damage that it does is probably lowered or something, but regardless, you can probably still use it to one-shot enemies by just using viral. You might just need to apply more viral with it, and then it kind of makes you wonder why, like, when his best ability is a Helminth, like, what's going on there. What's more is because of the way his other 3 abilities work with each other, the only real ability you can reasonably Helminth off him, if you want to play Oberon, for playing Oberon, is to get rid of his first, which means getting rid of his only ability that does any form of damage, and also the only ability that gives him any form of a damage buff. And then it's like, what am I doing here? But again, I digress till the end of this ability explanation. Oberon's second ability is called Hallowed Ground. Hallowed Ground basically is just this ability that applies this area effect on the ground that deals radiation damage to enemies. And previously it would only activate in a cone in front of Oberon. Now it activates in a full 360 around him, which is a very nice user-friendly buff. In addition to this, it also now guarantees applies the radiation status effect, which is also really good. It can be really good for crowd control, applying enemies radiation, and it does synergize with his other abilities. Basically, though the ability hasn't changed in any way, it's just more user-friendly now, as it guarantees the radiation status effects, and instead of applying in a cone in front of him, it's a full 360 around him, making it easier to spread. Overall, though, the ability is still the same. It's also worth noting that while you stand on it, or while any other ally stands on it, you get status immunity, and if you get affected by a status effect while not on it, you can then walk on it to be cleansed of that negative status effects. The augment for this ability is that reapplying the ability will apply the you can have up to 3 of Hallowed Ground activated at once, by the way. Anyway, as I was saying, the augment makes it so that you can reactivate the ability to basically detonate it and deal the remaining radiation damage all in one go. The ability does basically no damage though, and while I haven't tested this, I can't imagine the augment does any damage either. Maybe it does. Maybe I'm crazy and maybe I'm missing out on something there, but based on the little amount of damage the ability does, I seriously can't imagine the augment does any significant damage either. Oberon's third ability, and really the only reason why you would play him and what his kit is kind of centered around, is Renewal. Renewal is a continuously draining ability, so it drains energy over time, that gives Oberon and all of his allies within affinity range both health regeneration and a armor buff, and that armor buff scales all the way up to 100%. So by default, at 100% power strength, it's 50%, and it caps at 100%. So it's not like the armor buff Valkyrie gets that doesn't have a cap. Renewal's cap is at 100%. This isn't that crazy though, because the Renewal armor buff is actually multiplicative with mods. So Oberon's Prime has at 450 health. If I had Steel Fiber at max health, at max rank, I would have 900 armor. Activating Renewal with its max stack of 100% would then double that again, giving me 180 armor. 1,800 armor. So it is pretty good in the sense that it's multiplicative mods, but like he is one of the highest armored frames now, but like he's nothing like Valkyrie. Without any mods, he'll be sitting at, his prime version would be set at like, I think it's 2,700 armor, where Valkyrie without any mods at the same level of armor buff from her second ability would be sitting at like 4,000 in her fourth ability. And again, her armor ability isn't capped at 100%. She can go even higher than that. So like, it's not quite as crazy as Valkyrie is, but it's still pretty good. The changes to this abilities are super simple. Basically, it works the same, however, it drains less energy, and previously you needed to be standing on Renewal to be benefiting from that armor buff. Now you always get the armor buff. The armor buff is also better now. Before it was just a flat 200 that you got, extra armor, which was really, really low, and now it's much better than that. So the armor buff is significantly better, and you don't need to be on Hallowed Ground to benefit from it. So again, the ability is basically just more user-friendly, but nothing has actually changed about the ability. The augment for this ability is helpful. It's basically just a health gate that all allies affected by Renewal benefit from, but it has a 60-second cooldown. That's nice. It's most helpful, especially when trying to like help out a new player or something like that. My issue with it though is there are other forms of health gates that anyone can benefit from, like Martyr Symbiosis, that don't have a cooldown. I mean, Martyr Symbiosis technically does have a cooldown because of the recovery time of the companion, but you can shorten that, and it's shorter than 60 seconds as a default anyway. This update did change the cooldown from 90 seconds to 60 seconds, which is better, but my issue is I don't think health gates like that should have massive cooldowns when there exist other health gates like Nidus's passive or even Valkyrie's passive that don't have cooldowns. So, but hey, what can you do? And then there is his fourth ability. His fourth ability basically just does a minuscule amount of radiation damage. Yep, it's nothing to even kill, not enough damage to even kill a fly, but it does armor strip enemies by 60%. And this is what it looks like. As you can see, the enemies are now armor stripped. Obviously, it also applies the status effect, I'm pretty sure. Yes, it does. And so, a 60% armor strip is useful. It's nice that it's 60%, meaning I think you only need 167% power strength to fully strip with it, which is pretty low, which is definitely nice. But you want to mod for 200% power strength anyway to get the max amount of armor from Renewal, so it's like, yeah, well. But it is still just an armor strip, and there are tons of ways to armor strip enemies these days. However, again, the ability is much better than what it was previously, as previously you would need, the enemies would only get armor stripped if they were standing on hallowed ground. Now they always get armor stripped. So again, the ability is just more user friendly. But the ability is buffed in a few other ways. First of all, if the ability killed enemies, they would drop increased chance to drop health orbs. Now the ability marks enemies for a few seconds, and if they die while marked, they have that increased chance to drop health orbs. This is much better because the ability does no damage, so it didn't kill any enemies. But now you can just apply it on enemies, kill them, and get the extra health orb drops, which then synergizes with this passive, so that works really well actually. Again, a nice user-friendly update to the ability. And then the other thing that it does, and this is new, is that the ability also gives a flat armor increase. And the amount of armor that it gives is based off the amount of enemies that were hit, and also the amount of armor, radiation status effects on those enemies. So if I just activate it now, you'll see that the armor I get is nothing great. It's 435, and it caps out at 1,000 armor, by the way. If I instead, however, applied Hallowed Ground first, and I let the enemies get radiation procs on them, and then I activated Reckoning, you'll see it's gone all the way up to 1,000. Now, there's an issue I have with this. Basically, my concern is that whenever you cast the ability, it reapplies that stack from 0. So you see I have that 1,000 now. If I recast the abilities on enemies that don't have radiation on them, it then dropped to 433. Basically, the reason why this happened is whenever you cast the ability, it resets the buff from 0, which means it doesn't stack with itself. It means casting the ability can end up giving you less armor from it. I'm actually really surprised they went with this because this is actually how Frost's 4th ability augment used to work, where the overguard didn't stack on itself and it gave you very little overguard. You'll now know that that's changed, and every time I cast the ability, I get more and more overguard. It's also worth noting that Frost's passive also gives him up to 1,000 armor, and it's more consistent than Reckoning. So that's something to note. But it's not all bad though, because the armor that Oberon gets from Reckoning applies after mods, meaning, again, if you have a max Steel Fiber on and you have the base 450 armor on Oberon Prime, you would get 900 armor from Steel Fiber, and then you would get an additional 1,000 on top of that, giving you 1,900. But it applies before renewal, meaning in that same scenario, you would end up with 3,800 armor, as renewal will apply after the 1,000 armor you get from his 4th ability, which is actually pretty cool, as it means you can get a lot of armor from renewal. As you can see now, I am getting a 1,385 buff from renewal, which is the 1,000 armor I get from Reckoning, and the base 380 armor I have, as I don't have Oberon Prime. I'm using the regular Oberon. So it actually works really well, renewal, and is a really good way to give you a lot of armor, and it is really cool how it applies before renewal in that way, to give a lot of armor from renewal. Basically, the issue is though, unless you're priming enemies consistently with radiation, the ability isn't going to be pumping out enough armor to really make it worth it. And the best way to apply enemies with radiation in Oberon's kit is his 2nd ability. So, in other words, if you want to make the most out of his 3rd ability in terms of the armor it gives, you kind of want to pair it with its 4th. And if you want to make the most out of its 4th, you pair that with its 2nd ability. And the 2nd ability also increases the amount of heals you get from the 3rd ability. In other words, his second, 3rd, and 4th all synergize really well with each other. And his 1st ability doesn't. Meaning, his 1st ability is the only ability you really want to consider taking off him, unless you were going for a specific build that is going to one-shot enemies. Which again, you could do on one of the Warframes with the Helminth. That's sad though, because his 1st is the only ability that does any damage, and the only ability that buffs his damage. That basically leaves him as a frame where his only thing he does is provide heals for himself and his teammates, and extra armor for himself and his teammates. He does also armor strip enemies, but there are many ways to armor strip enemies, and armor stripping these days is not as amazing as it was once. It's so-so now because of how much enemies got nerfed by having the armor capped at 90%. It's still nice, don't get me wrong, but it's not like nearly as amazing as it was back in the day. And even back in the day, it was still so-so because we have so many ways to armor strip enemies. So, once again, all Oberon is a Warframe that gives you armor and health. That's his entire kit. His entire kit, just armor and health. And a good bit of crowd control. To be fair, radiation is a good form of crowd control. So he does do that. I mean, it also crowd controls Eximus units technically. So like, in a roundabout way. So like, he does have good crowd control. But again, besides that, just armor and health. Think about Valkyrie that has more healing than Oberon, and more armor than Oberon, and also does a stupid amount of damage, and has a health gate that doesn't have a 60-second cooldown. Like, it's just... this is what we got. Pretty much the only thing that was changed about his kit is his abilities are now nicer to use. They're more user-friendly. I get the armor from his third without needing to be on hallowed ground. His fourth armor strips without needing to enemies be on a hallowed ground. They work a lot more better now. His kit was old, it didn't work well, it really made it feel clunky and didn't really have a place. His kit is much more streamlined, it works a lot better now, it does what it wants to do significantly better. But when all you do is give yourself heals and armor, really? Like, that's it? When you have so many Warframes that just do so much. I mean, think about Jade, think about Wisp, think about Citrine. They do heals or armor or shields or something like that, plus everything else they do, which is just way significantly better. Even Trinity, that gives me the energy, the extra heals, the shield and health heals, plus the extra damage reduction. Like, what really, and she has the armor gate, and she gives a health gate to her full squad as well. Like, where's the argument where I play Oberon over any of these other frames? Of course, the argument is simply, I like Oberon, I think he's cool, therefore I want to play it. And that's a more than valid argument. And at the end of the day, that's all that really matters. If you like to play a frame, you should play it regardless if it's good or bad. But when talking about if a frame is good and bad, you obviously are going to compare it to another frame. And when I can compare Oberon to like 5 other Warframes that just do what he does but way better, this is him after he's reworked. Like, I used to say Oberon was the worst Warframe in the game. I would honestly probably still call him the second worst Warframe in the game. Like, this is not a good rework. All that changed was his abilities are nicer to use now, but that doesn't fix the fundamental issues of that what his abilities do just aren't useful. And it's not like I'm saying health tanking is bad. No, health tanking is fine. And his abilities work really well for him, but he's not a support because you don't need survivability support in this game. Every Warframe is entirely self-sufficient. If you need to rely on another player in the game to keep you alive, you have a bad build. That's the end of the day. You can make a build on any Warframe that can survive completely perfectly fine. Any Warframe in the game can health tank. Any Warframe, even the squishiest. At least on base steel path, and endurance, no. Any Warframe in the game with shields can shield tank. Any Warframe. You don't need a frame like Oberon to give extra armor and extra health to do this. When I say any Warframe can survive, I'm not saying any Warframe can survive with shield gating. I'm saying any Warframe in the game, all 62 of them, can tank in base steel path, at least into levels of 500 or 400, 500 or so. Less effective in that case, but it works. You can make it work. Any Warframe. You don't need a frame like Oberon to make it possible. So when that's all you do, it's kind of disappointing, especially when there are frames that give buffs like that to allies, and also damage buffs, which is what's actually valuable in this game. Simply just providing health buffs isn't really valuable. And Oberon does have a damage buff through his first ability's augment, except his first ability is the only ability that we can actually really Helminth off because his second, third, and fourth ability work too well together. It's just what they do is just not that favorable. So yeah, honestly, I'm really disappointed by his rework because I was really excited for him to be reworked because Oberon is a really old frame. He has a really good history of being a really strong frame actually. He just got really outdated. It wasn't that his design was bad originally, he just got outdated as the game progressed. And I was really excited for him to get a rework because I was really excited for him to be good, and I thought there was a lot of things you could do with him. As again, he has a long history of being a good frame. And this rework just has me extremely disappointed. I'm just being honest. Anyway, even though I spent this entire time basically ragging on Oberon and how I'm disappointed by the rework, I do actually have a build, believe it or not. So let me get into the build. Well, basically, at the end of the day, since I have Helminth off his first ability, as I was kind of forced to, originally I tried Helminth off hallowed ground, but the kit just wasn't working as well as I'd like to. I wasn't getting the amount of armor I would like to out of it, as I was relying on my armor for energy max with Arcane Battery. So I ended up putting hallowed ground back on and getting rid of Smite, which got rid of my damage buff. So pretty much all it is just health tank and use whatever weapon you want. In order to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, I ended up using an Archgun. In fact, Noko's new signature Archgun. Because it's like, oh, well, Archguns got buffed. You can now put on 2 Arcanes onto them. One primary and 1 secondary Arcane, so let's try them out. And is it worth using a heavy gun now in missions? No, not really. Archguns have been significantly buffed by using the 2 Arcanes, which is really good. I really love to hear that. But at the end of the day, they're still not that great, mainly due to the fact that heavy ammo drops is pretty rare. And if you run out of ammo with the heavy gun, you're slapped with a 5-minute cooldown. And if that's your only gun that you're relying on for DPS, yeah, Also, the simple truth is you can easily do way more damage with a melee primary and secondary weapon, so there isn't really much of a reason to use a heavy gun, which locks you out of using your primary, second, or melee when it does less damage. Again, you can do it for fun, which I would highly recommend because it is fun, but for a purely logistical standpoint, it doesn't make sense. But because of my choice to use a heavy gun, I had to put on Dispensary Proteus Helminth on Oberon for the Helminth ability, because Dispensary drops a universal ammo pack, which does give heavy ammo, which means I can actually keep my arc gun activated and never have to deal with that 5-second cooldown. But 5-minute cooldown, sorry. But if I end up dying for whatever reason, which to be fair is Oberon really shouldn't happen, at least not on base store path. But if I did end up dying for whatever reason, it does mean I still have to wait a cooldown before I can recast the heavy gun, and I'm kind of screwed, especially if I don't have any of my other setups set up for DPS. My other weapons set up for DPS, which in this build I don't. So dying kind of kills the whole build. Again, you don't need to use an arc gun for this build. You can use whatever weapon you want. The actual Oberon side of this build is literally just a health tank. That's it. It's just survivability. You can actually do this on other Warframes as well, but have damage buffs as well. It's entirely your choice if you just want to play Oberon. I considered making a nuke build for him. I tested his fourth. I tested the fourth of the augment. It does no damage. There are definitely fun things you can do with his first ability. His first ability is actually pretty good, but again, it's a Helminth. So, but yeah. The actual Oberon build is literally just a vessel to tank damage. It doesn't actually do anything but tank damage, meaning you can put on any weapon you want and it wouldn't affect the build in any way, because that's all Oberon does. He just tanks damage and doesn't do anything else, unfortunately. But let's actually look at the build. Alright, so for the aura slot in the Oberon's build, you can run whatever you want, doesn't matter. I just use Steel Charger for the extra mod capacity. I do have Prime Continuity along with Organ Message for the ability duration. We are running Blind Rage just for a bit of strength. This maxes out our armor strip from Reckoning, and it doesn't give us the full amount of armor from Renewal, but we are using Matarite. This means we can get the extra 40% of power strength from Void Slinging, and then we just do that before we activate Renewal, and then since Renewal has an infinite duration, as long as we have energy, we never have to worry about that ever again. Then we do have Augur Reach and Stretch for the range. That increases the range of Power of the Ground. You can have 3 of them activated, so you don't need a massive range, because you can just cast more of them. But it also increases the range of his 4th ability, meaning we're going to get more armor from it and more consistent armor stripping as well, so it definitely makes it better. Arcane Battery, of course, for the actual energy. This gives us, I think 1,000 plus energy with all of his armor maxed out, so we get a crap ton of max energy from it. Arcane Blessing for some extra health along with Vitality to give us super tanky, so we have a bunch of health along with a bunch of armor, and of course Adaptation to make us even more tanky. And then we are using Equilibrium because he generates more health orbs for us, and this is going to be our main source of energy economy. That works really well for him. Now let's actually look at the Archgun build. Unfortunately, Archguns don't have the best mods, which is unfortunate, and I am using Noko's new gun, as I said, which is pretty cool. It has the unique trait that it fires out 6 shots, each with an AoE, and each AoE does one of these 6 types of combined elemental damage types. You can, of course, then mod on additional elements, and whatever you mod on the weapon will do for each shot. You'll see that the first shot does blast and gas, the second does corrosive and gas. This is because I've modded on gas. So all my shots do gas, along with the additional element they do as well. The issue I have with this fun gimmick, which is fun, is it makes it so that multi-shot gives a base damage buff instead of actually giving multi-shot, which really ruins the point of multi-shot. And I did check that it was base damage. It is functioning additively with base damage, meaning it's really not that useful to mod for. Anyway, we are running Fire Rate with the augmented trigger. We have our heat plus status chance, and then we have our toxic plus status chance for our gas. We are running more status chance, of course. This is a gas status build. We're going to apply a lot of gas clouds, and it's going to do a lot of lingering damage on the battlefield, and it honestly works quite effectively. And then we have our crit damage, as we are using secondary elevate for our secondary arcane, which will increase our crit chance, so we'll actually benefit from the crit damage. As you'll notice, the base crit chance is actually pretty low of this weapon. We are using resolution focus. This basically means we don't need to use prime sure-footed. However, you could, instead of this, use prime sure-footed or use Yunaru as another option. And then you could change this out for quick reload or whatever it's called, the Archgun mod that increases the reload, which I actually do think the gun needs. The reload is a bit annoying. I would prefer to have faster reload, but I don't have that mod, and the way you get that mod is a little bit annoying, so I went for this instead. I do have marked target. This just increases the status chance more, as I am applying a damage over time build with gas. So the more status chance is obviously going to be good. And primed rubited leaded barrow, or however you would pronounce that, just for the base damage. We are using primary merciless for even more base damage. So this is somewhat not the greatest, but since there just isn't that many good Archgun mods to choose from anyway, you kind of can't avoid it. At the end of the day, Archguns just don't have a good source of mods, so you are limited to what you can do with them. Having the 2 arcanes is a massive buff for them, but I would love to see additional buffs. Increase the drop chance of heavy ammo drops, so I don't have to run an entire Helminth just to make using an Archgun viable in missions. And also just increase, like, give them better mods, make them more streamlined with the modern day weapons we have. And that would be really good. But this is a really good first step in the buff for them, so I am excited to see more things that come for them. For the companion, I am using the Panzer Valprofiler with the Martyr Symbiosis mod for Valprofilers, which gives me a health gate. I'm not using the augments for Oberon to give me a health gate. I'm relying on this, as this one doesn't have a cooldown. It does kill the companion and go into its recovery timer, but since its recovery timer, thanks to Panzer Devolution, is only 30 seconds, and that can be further reduced by bond mods, then it's really not really an issue. Viral Quills will also have its prime enemies for me, and then we also have Synth Deconstruct for even more health drop chance to synergize with Oberon's passive, and also to give me extra energy through Equilibrium. Medipet Kit is for the survivability companion. We have Tenacious Bond to increase our critical damage for our weapons. Don't actually know if that applies to the heavy gun, but I hope it does. And then Hunter Recovery is so the companion can actually heal me as well, so we get even more survivability for myself. Not needed for Oberon because of his third ability, but I do reuse these builds, so that's why that's there. And then we have Link Vitality for the health of the companion, of course, and Fetch is a must-have mod. The Panzer Claws are set up entirely for utility, so we have Swipe for the additional attacks, we have Shocking Claws for the extra status chance, we have Precision Conditioning for the melee damage, Bite for the crit chance and crit damage, mainly for Tenacious Bond, and then we have Magnetic Strike, which will convert impact procs to magnetic, and then we have Ballerina, which makes it so it applies 4 impact procs whenever it attacks the enemy, so it actually applies 4 magnetic procs, which increases our damage to Overguard, so that's kind of nice. Call of the Week is basically just it's just condition overloaded for companions. Bloodthirsty lets it heal itself by a little bit, but not that great. And Protective Posture is pretty nice, gives me some extra crit chance, and also just reduces the damage enemies do around me, so it's kind of nice. Again, this is mainly set up for utility, not actual damage, but it can still do decent damage. For the utility weapons, I recommend just running whatever you want, but I would recommend putting on things like Amalgam Serration and Amalgam Barrier Diffusion for the extra utility, and something like the Protoss or another similar Incarnate that gives like more utility, like the Protoss' second evolution gives sprint speed and slide, and the third evolution gives park velocity. For the focus school, like I did say, I am using Matarite. This is so I can Void Sling twice to get the 40% power strength to give me the max armor from my third ability. I am sitting at 95% armor from the third ability just with the mod setup, so you don't need to use this if you don't want to, but it is what I would recommend. It's up to you though if you want to use a different focus school. Anyway, that is all from this video. I know I did spend a lot of the video basically ragging on Oberon and how I was disappointed with the rework, but like, it's just not that great of a rework, and I did expect more from him, and I was excited for the rework too, so I was definitely disappointed to hear about it. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, consider giving me a like and a subscribe, and once again, I want to make this very clear. Me saying that Oberon's rework is bad should not mean not playing Oberon. If you think he's cool and you want to play him, 100% get your hands on him, play him. He's fun, enjoy him. It shouldn't matter if he's good or bad to enjoy him. Like, you should be able to enjoy him regardless. It's purely just a statement of me comparing him with other frames, and that I expected more from a rework, pretty much. That's it. But like, if you enjoy him, that's amazing. Like, seriously, it shouldn't matter what other people think of the Warframe. Enjoy the frames you like, regardless. But yeah, if you liked my content and enjoyed what I'm doing here, consider giving me a like and subscribe to give me some interaction so you can spread to more people. And maybe check out some of my other videos. I already have a video out for Neko, so check that out if you're interested. And until next time, bye-bye.